Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to a new video. And today it's going to be a little bit of a different video than you're normally used to. Something that I really want to discuss a little bit. So a couple of days ago, I think it's already been a week or something like that, there has been an agreement leaked between Capcom and Sony. And it's not entirely certain that this is an actual agreement signed by Capcom and Sony, but it looks pretty authentic to me. Of course, nobody knows for sure, but it also looks a little bit like an agreement that was already leaked before for a different Capcom game, so for Monster Hunter between Capcom and Sony. So it kind of points towards the fact that this is a real agreement signed by Capcom and Sony. And so in this agreement, there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about that kind of annoy me a little bit. I know that this is almost standard industry practices, that exclusivity deals are being made, of course, between the publisher of the game and then, of course, between the platform holders. But still, there are a couple of things in here that I don't just generally like, and I don't really believe that it's good for the industry. And that's why I kind of want to discuss that with you today. So this is the agreement. So it's called the Global PlayStation Exclusivity and Co-Marketing Agreement. So probably this is like a standard form, a standard type of agreement that they use for similar types of deals. Also, they use this probably for the Monster Hunter one. And basically this is being drafted probably by a couple of lawyers and then signed by both parties. What it basically talks about is what kind of things Capcom have to agree on in exchange for marketing financing by Sony. So it's not really clear how much is the dollar amount that Sony is contributing to this, but it makes it apparent that there is something that Sony is paying in order to get this exclusivity, these exclusivity clauses that are in this agreement. And so what it defines in the beginning of the agreement are competitive platforms. And what are competitive platforms? Well, they say competitive platforms are everything except PC and mobile platforms, which means Xbox One, Xbox Series X, including all the iterations and successors thereto. So probably the Xbox Series S wasn't announced back then. Nintendo Switch, Google Stadia, and of course other next generation hardware device and cloud streaming platforms such as Amazon and Apple services. So that is interesting. So something like Google Stadia is not allowed, but something like Steam, for example, which is just a PC storefront, is of course allowed. So that's kind of what you would expect to be a competitive platform for Sony. And then basically they continue and they define Project Village, and it could very well be that it wasn't titled exactly Resident Evil Village back then, so the working title was Project Village. And then they basically continue and they say here release date parity, and what that basically means is that the PlayStation version of course can never release later than another version on a competitive platform, so Xbox or of course a Nintendo Switch, etc. And this is also interesting. So the one here above, that was actually on the previous page. They say that if basically Capcom misses the target release date, then Sony can reduce their marketing dollars by 50%. Of course, it doesn't look like that is the case, so definitely, but that's also interesting that something like that is in the agreement as well. So moving on, this is the first thing, and this doesn't really annoy me. So basically what it says over here, it says the PlayStation version needs to have feature, content, and technical parity with the Xbox version or with other competitive platform versions. And what that basically means is that any platform that is similar to the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 4 Pro, and the PlayStation 5 cannot be more technically feature or content wise more advanced than those PlayStation platforms. And I actually just want to say that I don't really have an issue with that parity at all, with not with release date parity and not with feature, content, and technical parity. I think if all the versions are kind of the same, that's great. Then they mention the next section in the agreement is also interesting. So they mention PS platform timed exclusivity. So if the publisher, so we're gonna read it together, if the publisher releases DLC during the term, publisher shall release any DLC first on PS platforms and not release any version of such DLC on competitive platforms until at least 14 days after the DLC is released on PS platforms, which is quoted as defined as this is the timed exclusive DLC term. This DLC can never appear on the same day and date on competitive platforms such as the Xbox. That is what this paragraph basically says. So it will always be exclusive first on PlayStation. And that is kind of strange to me for a couple of reasons. Now, I understand that this is just business between those companies. I mean, they strike business deals all the time. But that doesn't mean that it has to be this way, of course. For example, if you have an Xbox Series X and you know that Resident Evil DLC is going to be released on the PlayStation platform, will you buy a PlayStation 5? No. Well, probably you cannot get a PlayStation 5 because they're in very short supply right now. I mean, it's very difficult to get your hands on a PlayStation 5. It's even difficult to go to any brick and mortar store at all. So how will you get a PlayStation 5? And then again, will you really spend €400 or €500 or dollars to get a PlayStation 5 just to play this DLC? No, probably most people won't do it, so they just have to wait 2 weeks. I mean, PlayStation users don't care if it is day and date on the Xbox. It's only an annoyance for the Xbox users. So this paragraph only exists to annoy another platform. And I think that's just generally bad to include something like this. And then here they talk about subscription services, and they say, so I'm gonna read a little bit from this agreement. During the term, publishers shall not authorize, assist, or encourage any third party to include the game in any competitive platform, so Xbox, Switch, PC streaming platforms, subscription service that is competitive with any PS subscription service, including but not limited to Google Stadia Pro subscriptions, Microsoft's Xbox Live Gold, Project xCloud, or Game Pass subscription service, or similar competitive platform subscription services. So what it says here is pretty obvious. The game just cannot release on Game Pass, and it is probably for 1 year. I know in the clause after that it says 1 year, so I guess this is also from 1 year. They talk about the term, but I couldn't find where that is exactly defined in that agreement over here. So, but they do talk about the term, and that is probably for 1 year. And so I actually don't think this is beneficial at all to Capcom. I think, in fact, when publishers play nice with Game Pass, they can get a lot of benefits out of it. So for example, what you usually see on Game Pass is that when publishers make their game available on the service before some kind of DLC releases for that game, of course the DLC will sell a lot better because a lot more people now have access to the game and they might be interested in the DLC as well. A great example is, for example, Doom Eternal. So you saw that right around the time that the DLC released, so the Ancient Gods Part 1 and the Ancient Gods Part 2, Bethesda actually put the game on Game Pass so that more people would then play the DLC. And so that is something that I'm also kind of annoyed by this. So basically Sony and Capcom agree to lock some people out of this, and I just don't think that is necessary at all. And I even think that kind of hurts the game if the DLC would release day and date on both Xbox and PlayStation. Then probably the game would get a lot more mindshare. And I'm sure Microsoft has exactly the same type of agreements, and I'm sure those are already on the internet as well. And I think that's sad as well. Yeah, no, that's just my thoughts that I wanted to share about this. And I'm sure that if Capcom, didn't agree to these clauses, then probably Sony wouldn't, take over those marketing costs or whatever they do in return for these exclusivity deals. I mean, I guess that's just the way the industry goes. That doesn't mean I have to like it. And that's basically what I wanted to say in this video. Let me know in the comments, of course, what you think about this. I'm always interested to see what our viewers have to say about this particular thing. So like I said before, it's a little bit of a different video than before. And yeah, just let me know your thoughts also about what you think about this format. We're experimenting a little bit. Yeah, with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.